Hi, I'm Nele Borgert, and today I'll be speaking about a paper that I wrote with Oliver Reithmaier, Luisa Jansen, Larina Hillemann, Ian Hussey, and Malte Elson, which is called Home is Where the Smart is, Development and Validation of the Cybersecurity Self-Efficacy in Smart Homes Scale, short CySESH. Today's ubiquity of devices connected to the internet raises concerns about the security and privacy of smart homes. The fundamental premise of improving security is that cybersecurity is both a technical and a psychological challenge, because even the most sophisticated technical measure will fail to protect data privacy and security when not used as intended by the designer. So that the prediction of behavioral interest, choice, and endurance of users' security behavior becomes a very impactful research field. Cybersecurity self-efficacy is the only construct on the human side to predict cybersecurity behavior consistently. But what is cybersecurity self-efficacy? Well, it is defined as the belief about one's own ability to enact skills related to IT security and privacy. So it is context specific by definition. However, the effectiveness of interventions to support secure user behavior is limited by the lack of validated instruments to measure this relevant psychological construct. Hence, we have developed a 12-item unidimensional measure of domain-specific self-efficacy beliefs across 5 studies. In 3 pre-studies, we generated and refined the item pool, and then we conducted 2 validation studies. One initial and one major pre-registered study to analyze reliability indices and convergent as well as discriminant validity. But first, we conducted an overarching literature survey on cybersecurity self-efficacy to gain a general review dataset on the topic. You can access the pre-registration and data via the links that will lead you to our OSF files. When we investigated the current literature about self-efficacy measures, we found 173 different unique measures of self-efficacy across 174 studies. And these measures showed very low item overlap and were mostly developed in an ad hoc fashion. So our motivation was to close this methodological gap by providing a high-quality self-efficacy assessment tool. Thus, we wanted to satisfy the apparent need of a low-cost, standardized, and validated research method. The 3 main quality criteria we aimed for were, first of all, objectivity, to minimize the influence of unsystematic effects, then reliability, to allow for consistent performance of users via a general self-efficacy factor. And finally, of course, validity, so that scores on the CySESH scale actually match the trait manifestations of different users. We took 3 steps to develop and validate CySESH. For the item development, we implemented a deductive strategic approach by considering assumptions of the social cognitive theory on self-efficacy and the resultant guidance on domain specificity and item development. We also conducted an expert workshop on smart home security to establish initial content validity, after which we designed the first set of 45 items. So items were not formulated inductively on the basis of prior published scales. Given the importance of content validity, its several sources were consulted in 2 consecutive pilot studies. The objective of the first study was to refine content validity regarding domain clarity and technical quality of the generated items. And in the second study, native English speakers were recruited to ensure the comprehensibility of items and instructions as kind of the final part of technical quality. Analysis reduced the total item number to 13 items. Then for scale evaluation, 2 studies were conducted. A, an initial validation study that focused on discriminant validity, and B, a main pre-registered validation study that examined reliability as well as additional validity characteristics. For discriminant validity purposes, we use related constructs such as outcome expectation, self-esteem, and optimism. For convergent validity, self-efficacy and information security was used. After psychometric evaluation, the final scale consisted of 12 items. You'll find data and code linked in our paper or here via the QR code. Here you can see the item analysis results of our final items. CySESH's response scale ranges from 1 to 7, with lower values characterizing lower self-efficacy beliefs and higher values characterizing higher self-efficacy beliefs. We decided on psychometric inclusion criteria that would ensure moderate item difficulty, with means between 3 and 5, sufficient differentiation capability of items, so in other words, SDs had to be greater than 1.4, and adequate homogeneity between items and scale. So only item correlations that were greater than 0.3 were included. Regarding the main results of our scale analysis, we first looked at the distribution of CySESH means and the scale's unidimensionality. The overall mean scale score was 4.15 with a standard deviation of 1.1, so no violation of normal distribution assumptions or biased tendencies of the sample to agreement or disagreement are indicated. We conducted them 4 analyses to test unidimensionality. Inter-item correlations indicated a moderate to strong relatedness ranging between 0.29 and 0.61. A confirmatory factor analysis using a maximum likelihood estimator showed mixed results for one-factor solution, but using a diagonally weighted least squares estimator designed for ordinal data showed better fit indices. And finally, standardized loading coefficients from a unidimensional SEM confirmed the assumed strong relationships between the items and a common latent construct. For reliability analysis of CySESH items, both estimates demonstrate excellent reliability, with alpha being 0.9 and omega also being 0.9. To assess convergent construct validity of CySESH, we compared the correlation between CySESH and self-efficacy in information security. The expected trend of the relationship between CySESH and SIGCHI was supported with a correlation of 0.64. For each discriminant validity analysis, we also computed correlation coefficients, and these results nicely reflect the assumed theoretical differences and yet relatedness between CySESH, outcome expectation, self-esteem, and optimism, with correlations ranging between 0.17 and 0.26. Ultimately, this talk introduced you to CySESH, a well-performing, validated scale for the assessment of cybersecurity self-efficacy in smart homes. Our research is limited by future work on its validity regarding several other interesting constructs from self-efficacy's nomological network, such as proficiency, then the generalizability to populations other than the one we recruited, and also gender-specific questions. Given we observed gender effects, results showed that male participants scored a bit higher on CySESH. However, using CySESH can be a valuable method to evaluate human factors of cybersecurity in smart homes. For example, researchers might benefit from the potential method standardization in the field. For practitioners, we suggest to use CySESH as an assessment tool implemented in technological wizards or commissioning assistants that might then customize the interface design. And CySESH can also help to identify current issues or risk groups so that significant consumer protection measures may follow. Thank you for your attention, and please don't hesitate to get in touch with us.